Everyone. Buenas tardes. Welcome y bienvenidos to our second event of our new Inspire, Amplify, and Prepare series, Shaping the Future Juntos. If you are here, it means you are an aspiring or current teacher, you love teachers, or you recognize the value and importance of teachers in your community. You may be a student wondering about the teaching profession. You may be an educator tapping into some inspiration. You may simply be curious about how to encourage more people into what is surely the profession that most shapes the future, teaching. Whichever group you fit in, I am glad you are here. I am Dr. Nuri Castro, and I serve as the Senior Program Manager for Future Black and Future Latino Latina teachers here at Teach. For the purposes of today's webinar recording, I will serve as the moderator and facilitator. So to give you all an overview of our time together today, we'll go through some grounding and some virtual room expectations. I will talk very briefly about Teach and our FBT and FLT efforts. I will introduce our panelists. We will get into a great panel discussion. We will have an opportunity for community questions and reflections, and then I will close us out with some reminders. So to take a moment to ground us into this virtual space, I want to share some community expectations for this virtual time together. Please utilize the Zoom chat box to share comments and build community with each other. If you would like, you can enable closed captions by clicking live transcripts on your screen. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any reactions or reflections throughout our time together, please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A feature to share out with everyone or to share with us privately. At the end of our time together, we're going to provide a survey link. This is an important tool for you all to share direct feedback for us to know how to be more intentional in our offerings. At the end of the survey, you'll have an opportunity to enter a random drawing for $200. So make sure you stay until the end and don't miss that opportunity. Lastly, all attendees will receive a post-event email with additional resources and a recording of this webinar. So a brief overview of Teach and what we do. Our mission at Teach is to end the national teacher shortage and diversify the teaching profession. We are the recruiting arm of the teaching profession. We partner directly with state departments of education, school districts, teacher preparation programs, and community organizations. We are a free one-stop shop for anyone interested in becoming a licensed educator. Our team at Teach can support anyone, no matter their background, to become a licensed educator. Specifically, this includes high school students considering the classroom, a college student yet to decide their major, or a career changer interested in a new path. Our personalized support includes free one-on-one coaching and advising with current classroom educators who serve as licensure coaches, scholarship and fee reimbursements, educator preparation program and scholarship search tools, customized checklists, how-to guides, and email, text, and chat support. Currently, we offer personalized support in Colorado, Connecticut, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, North and South Carolina, and New York to try to encourage as many people as possible to enter this profession through which they can have such a profound impact on their local community. A little bit about our Future Black Teachers and Future Latino Latina Teachers initiatives. We focus specifically on supporting the next generation of Black and Latino Latina educators. We carry out these efforts and these initiatives in tandem with all of the resources I previously mentioned by ensuring that we remain culturally relevant, culturally responsive, inclusive, and intentional in our offerings. We conduct annual user research to hear directly from our Black and Latino Latina users about their experiences, their challenges, and their wins to provide support that centers our users' lived experiences. As many of us know, the teaching profession has a diversity gap. The nation's school children are 42% Black and Latino Latina, while the teaching force is only 16% Black and Latino and Latina. According to the Education Trust, 40% of the nation's public schools do not have a single teacher of color. In many states, Black and Latino students attend schools without a single teacher of their same race or ethnicity. Students of color and students from low-income backgrounds are 4 times more likely to attend schools with larger percentages of uncertified and inexperienced teachers. Given these data points, Black and Latino students, particularly those who are from low-income backgrounds, are being severely underserved, resulting in increased discipline referral rates, lower graduation rates, and less access to advanced coursework and college and career-ready educational opportunities. Research demonstrates that students of color are more likely to succeed by having even just one teacher of a similar race or ethnicity during their schooling, while all students benefit from a diverse educator workforce. For schools to create a positive, safe, and welcoming environment for all students, it is imperative to have an educator workforce that reflects the racially, ethnically, and linguistically diverse communities they serve. These data serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of the work we're doing at Teach and the endless need for us to be in community with each other to build a bolder, a brighter, and an equitable education system for our future generations. So considering all of this, I am excited to now introduce my colleagues who are going to serve as panelists during the rest of our time together. So we're going to start in Texas and introduce Dr. Zainab Munoz, a dynamic and multicultural educational leader with over 16 years of experience. She was born to Egyptian parents in Texas, and her family relocated to Kuwait when she was 6 years old, where she attended international schools. Dr. Munoz began her career in Irving ISD in Texas in 2008 as an alternative certified bilingual teacher, fluent in Spanish, which is her third language. She taught third grade bilingual classes for 3 years, during which her principal encouraged her to pursue leadership roles. This pivotal mentorship led Dr. Munoz to earn a master's degree in educational leadership from Dallas Baptist University. She served as a summer school principal and in 2013 became an assistant principal. Over the past decade at Texas Tech University, Dr. Munoz has made transformative contributions to the field of education. She earned her doctorate in educational leadership in 2017, and in 2024, Dr. Munoz achieved another milestone by being promoted to an assistant professor of practice in educational leadership at Texas Tech University. In this role, she conducts research and teaches full-time in the university's master's and doctoral programs for educational leadership. Bienvenida, Dr. Munoz. Now, we're going to travel to North Carolina and introduce Elaine Townsend Utin, a proud Peruvian American and the co-founder and executive director of Latinx Ed. In this nonprofit capacity, Elaine leads statewide efforts to advance Latina leadership and participation in higher education in North Carolina. Elaine's dedication to advocating for the Latina community, particularly those facing financial and geographical limitations, stems from her upbringing in rural U.S. South as a 1.75 generation immigrant and first generation college student. Elaine served as a teacher for 9 years and taught English language arts and social studies. In addition to teaching and her role as a director, Elaine is an award-winning educator specializing in conscious leadership development, coaching, and positive racial ethnic identity development. Her notable contributions to the field of education led her to recognition on Forbes 30 Under 30 education list. She holds a master's degree in technology, innovation, and education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, along with a bachelor's degree in middle grades education from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Bienvenida, Elaine. And last, but certainly not least, we're going to New York and introducing Jorge Santos, a high school special education math teacher in Queens. His roles have included being a peer collaborative teacher, grade team leader, restorative justice coordinator, and member of the instructional leadership team. Jorge's main focus is centering curriculum and pedagogy around equity and restorative justice practices. He is currently developing math curriculum that centers around identity building and multiracial narratives. He's implemented Indigenous and African cultures into math classrooms. Jorge has received many recognitions and served on various panels highlighting his work and contributions to the field. In 2022, he published his first children's book titled Soy Bella, and is publishing his second children's book titled Little Dreamer, a dedication to those who serve in our communities. Jorge holds master's degrees in criminology and in special education from St. John's University. Bienvenido, Jorge. As you all can see, we have an incredible lineup of panelists, so I'm excited to spend this time with them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see them, and we're going to get started. So to give you all an overview of our time together today, we'll go through some grounding and some virtual room expectations. I will talk very briefly about TEACH and our FBT and FLT efforts. I will introduce our panelists. We will get into a great panel discussion. We will have an opportunity for community questions and reflections, and then I will close us out with some reminders. So to take a moment to ground us into this virtual space, I want to share some community expectations for this virtual time together. Please utilize the Zoom chat box to share comments and build community with each other. If you would like, you can enable closed captions by clicking live transcripts on your screen. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any reactions or reflections throughout our time together, please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A feature to share out with everyone or to share with us privately. At the end of our time together, we're going to provide a survey link. This is an important tool for you all to share direct feedback for us to know how to be more intentional in our offerings. At the end of the survey, you'll have an opportunity to enter a random drawing for $200. So make sure you stay until the end and don't miss that opportunity. Lastly, all attendees will receive a post-event email with additional resources and a recording of this webinar. So a brief overview of TEACH and what we do. Our mission at TEACH is to end the national teacher shortage and diversify the teaching profession. We are the recruiting arm of the teaching profession. We partner directly with state departments of education, school districts, teacher preparation programs, and community organizations. We are a free one-stop shop for anyone interested in becoming a licensed educator. Our team at TEACH can support anyone, no matter their background, to become a licensed educator. Specifically, this includes high school students considering the classroom, a college student yet to decide their major, or a career changer interested in a new path. Our personalized support includes free one-on-one coaching and advising with current classroom educators who serve as licensure coaches, scholarship and fee reimbursements, educator preparation program and scholarship search tools, customized checklists, how-to guides, and email, text, and chat support. Currently, we offer personalized support in Colorado, Connecticut, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, North and South Carolina, and New York to try to encourage as many people as possible to enter this profession through which they can have such a profound impact on their local community. A little bit about our Future Black Teachers and Future Latino Latina Teachers initiatives. We focus specifically on supporting the next generation of Black and Latino Latina educators. We carry out these efforts and these initiatives in tandem with all of the resources I previously mentioned by ensuring that we remain culturally relevant, culturally responsive, inclusive, and intentional in our offerings. We conduct annual user research to hear directly from our Black and Latino Latina users about their experiences, their challenges, and their wins to provide support that centers our users' lived experiences. As many of us know, the teaching profession has a diversity gap. The nation's school children are 42% Black and Latino Latina, while the teaching force is only 16% Black and Latino and Latina. According to the Education Trust, 40% of the nation's public schools do not have a single teacher of color. In many states, Black and Latino students attend schools without a single teacher of their same race or ethnicity. Students of color and students from low-income backgrounds are 4 times more likely to attend schools with larger percentages of uncertified and inexperienced teachers. Given these data points, Black and Latino students, particularly those who are from low-income backgrounds, are being severely underserved, resulting in increased discipline referral rates, lower graduation rates, and less access to advanced coursework and college and career-ready educational opportunities. Research demonstrates that students of color are more likely to succeed by having even just one teacher of a similar race or ethnicity during their schooling, while all students benefit from a diverse educator workforce. For schools to create a positive, safe, and welcoming environment for all students, it is imperative to have an educator workforce that reflects the racially, ethnically, and linguistically diverse communities they serve. These data serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of the work we're doing at Teach and the endless need for us to be in community with each other to build a bolder, a brighter, and an equitable education system for our future generations. So, considering all of this, I am excited to now introduce my colleagues who are going to serve as panelists during the rest of our time together. So, we're going to start in Texas and introduce Dr. Zainab Munoz, a dynamic and multicultural educational leader with over 16 years of experience. She was born to Egyptian parents in Texas, and her family relocated to Kuwait when she was 6 years old, where she attended international schools. Dr. Munoz began her career in Irving ISD in Texas in 2008 as an alternative certified bilingual teacher, fluent in Spanish, which is her third language. She taught third grade bilingual classes for 3 years, during which her principal encouraged her to pursue leadership roles. This pivotal mentorship led Dr. Munoz to earn a master's degree in educational leadership from Dallas Baptist University. She served as a summer school principal and in 2013 became an assistant principal. Over the past decade at Texas Tech University, Dr. Munoz has made transformative contributions to the field of education. She earned her doctorate in educational leadership in 2017, and in 2024, Dr. Munoz achieved another milestone by being promoted to an assistant professor of practice in educational leadership at Texas Tech University. In this role, she conducts research and teaches full-time in the university's master's and doctoral programs for educational leadership. Bienvenida, Dr. Munoz. Now, we're going to travel to North Carolina and introduce Elaine Townsend Utin, a proud Peruvian American and the co-founder and executive director of Latinx Ed. In this nonprofit capacity, Elaine leads statewide efforts to advance Latina leadership and participation in higher education in North Carolina. Elaine's dedication to advocating for the Latina community, particularly those facing financial and geographical limitations, stems from her upbringing in rural U.S. South as a 1.75 generation immigrant and first generation college student. Elaine served as a teacher for 9 years and taught English language arts and social studies. In addition to teaching and her role as a director, Elaine is an award-winning educator specializing in conscious leadership development, coaching, and positive racial ethnic identity development. Her notable contributions to the field of education led her to recognition on Forbes 30 Under 30 education list. She holds a master's degree in technology, innovation, and education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, along with a bachelor's degree in middle grades education from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Bienvenida, Elaine. And last but certainly not least, we're going to New York and introducing Jorge Santos, a high school special education math teacher in Queens. His roles have included being a peer collaborative teacher, grade team leader, restorative justice coordinator, and member of the instructional leadership team. Jorge's main focus is centering curriculum and pedagogy around equity and restorative justice practices. He is currently developing math curriculum that centers around identity building and multiracial narratives. He's implemented Indigenous and African cultures into math classrooms. Jorge has received many recognitions and served on various panels highlighting his work and contributions to the field. In 2022, he published his first children's book titled Soy Bella, and is publishing his second children's book titled Little Dreamer, a dedication to those who serve in our communities. Jorge holds master's degrees in criminology and in special education from St. John's University. Bienvenido, Jorge. As you all can see, we have an incredible lineup of panelists, so I'm excited to spend this time with them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see them, and we're going to get started. So friends, we're going to get started with you all telling us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become an educator and how your identity may have influenced that decision.
I can start us off. Well, hi, everyone. Good evening, or wherever you are. It's exciting to be here, and thank you for just the space to talk about this really important topic. So, a little bit about me. You kind of heard my bio, so I'll share a little bit more personal things. I live in Durham, North Carolina. Grew up in Waxhaw, North Carolina, so that's Union County for my North Carolina folks. But originally born in Peru. So I think that journey has been just the spaces we grow up in, the spaces we occupy. Like that has just been a really shaping of who I am and my identity. Um, I, as Dr. Castro mentioned, am the co-founder and executive director of Latinx Ed. And so we're an education nonprofit serving the state of North Carolina and advancing Latino leadership in education. So we have a lot to say about this topic, but also how it intersects with how we can mobilize in education as a community through higher education and more. And so I do come from a long line of educators. So this is kind of how I find my way into education is on both sides of my family. I come from a long kind of matriarchal lines. The women in my family have been educators and they told me not to do it though. Okay, y'all, they said they appreciate it, have loved their craft, but also have really faced struggles, things like keeping food on the table with when it comes to teacher pay, just the challenges that they wanted to see more from me. But again, they're the people who raised me and I am the oldest of 6 children. So I feel like it was a role I kind of naturally, you know, took on in my family of teaching others. And I just am really passionate about learning and personally, and then it turned into a profession. So being able to find that, especially as a first generation college student, was really powerful for me to kind of accept that destiny, if you will. I started out as a middle school teacher, and at this stage of my career, I've taught elementary, middle school, high school, and college level as well in South Korea, so internationally, but also in North Carolina. My first formal teaching experience was actually, I was thinking about this 19 years ago. So started out young in that formal teacher role. But I think what really affirmed the path that I've been on, and since those experiences teaching, is just how passionate and exciting it is to be able to connect with people who look like you, who share experiences and can really relate. And I think I didn't have that experience growing up. I didn't have a formal teacher. I will say my family, I see them as teachers, but in the formal classroom didn't have a Latino teacher. And so when I took until getting to grad school to be able to experience that, and it was such a transformational experience for me. And I think about that element of who I am and what I get to bring to the classroom. And then I'll also create spaces where other people get to bring themselves into the classroom because I know how incredibly important that is to how I learn and how we learn in general. So it's been a very big motivator is to be a part of that, shifting the representation within this field and now being able to open pathways for others to join and to also not just survive, but really thrive this profession. And so that's what I'm up to. So that's a little bit about me.
All right. So I kind of want to take us back because I've been teaching for about 9 years, but the reality is it's not what I originally set out to do. So I grew up in Corona, Queens. It's a neighborhood full of Latino immigrants, low social economic neighborhood. So growing up in that environment, but having certain privileges like, two parents in the household, parents that were always on top of me, made sure that I was getting the best quality education. I had that sense of privilege that I knew I wanted to, with that privilege, I wanted to make an impact. So I originally set out to become an attorney. That's what I wanted to do, which is why I got the master's in criminology. And I wanted to do that because I thought maybe that's the best way that I could impact my community, help people that were being targeted by a system that, judicial system that could be racist, that does target low social economic people. So I thought that that was the best way for me to use my voice, my privilege to be able to impact my community. So worked at a law firm for a little while. I did not enjoy it. I was like, like this is frustrating. Um, I need to help people before they even fall into this system. So then here I was. I had a mentor figure. He was a teacher at my high school, but he wasn't my teacher, so I never really considered him a teacher. He was actually my track coach, and he was Latino. And he always told me, "Man, you'd be a great teacher. You should become an educator. You'd be a great educator." And I was like, "No, I don't think so. It's not really for me." And then I was like, you know what? It is. It is because then I could potentially stop that school to prison pipeline, right? Because if I've taught middle school, I teach high school. And to be able to work with kids on a daily basis, for them to be able to see me, someone who grew up in their neighborhood, who understands, like, yeah, I know the chimney truck over there, I know the bodega over here, I've been around these streets, for them to make that connection, and for me to kind of hopefully give them some inspiration, right? Because growing up, I didn't see teachers like myself. The reality was I didn't have a male teacher of color until college, until the university level. So all throughout my K to high school, I didn't have someone that I was like, yeah, I could relate to them. I had amazing teachers, but no one that I could be like, yeah, they understand my culture, they understand where I'm coming from. So I think that making that decision to be able to be from New York, from Queens, to teach in Queens. I actually live in the Bronx right now, but to be from the boroughs and then understand the New York culture, understand the Latino demographics. It's honestly a fun experience every day, because whenever kids come in, they say certain slangs. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm from New York, so I know exactly what you mean. So it's something that I really enjoy.
Well, I'm excited to share and add to the conversation here. I appreciate Jorge sharing that education was not your initial path because that resonates with me. My inspiration and my role model is my father, who was a business professor. And growing up, I was very inspired by his journey. He was the only person in his family to go beyond elementary school. He became a national scholar at the high school level in Egypt and obtained his degrees and got a full scholarship to come to the United States to get his doctoral degree. And it took him 10 years. He did that in his second language, which, that was an accomplishment that really stood out to me and inspired my love for learning as well and learning languages. But it was my senior year in high school in Kuwait when my school hired a Spanish teacher. And prior to that year, I had not, I mean, I was familiar with Spanish, I knew of it, but I definitely wasn't immersed in it in the culture in Kuwait. But taking that initial Spanish class, I fell in love. The language was beautiful. It was so expressive. It really connected with my Arabic background of linguistics and being able to understand grammar and just connecting with people in a very expressive way. And what started out as just a passion to learn Spanish and follow perhaps in my father's footsteps led me to a degree in international business in Spanish. And then through that experience, I realized that I really wasn't passionate about the business world, but I wanted to help people. I wanted to uplift, and I wanted the work that I did to make a difference and to be something meaningful for other people's lives. And I'll be very honest, one of the first things I heard as a young college graduate was teachers work 187 days a year, at least in Texas. And I thought, oh, okay, so I can travel and I can have holidays and I can do all these wonderful things. And we all know in the field of education that teachers work way more than those 187 contract days. But that was an initial draw to explore this field and test it out. And through alternative certification, I got hired. It was a beautiful experience of just Friday before school started on Monday. I was offered a position. I got thrown into the school system. Do you want chairs? Do you want tables? Do you want individual desks? They were asking questions that I knew nothing about. They were, where are your classroom decorations? And, ooh, I didn't have any, little logistical things like that that seemed like major hiccups at the time, but were really just great learning experiences and opportunities to connect with other people at the school. I had donations, a hodgepodge of decorations from all of the different teachers, different themes and things like that. But really what I lacked in experience at that time, I made up for with love for the children. It was so easy to fall in love with working with my students, meeting their families, getting to see the joy on their faces. I think you can tell I started in elementary. I was a third grade teacher for 3 years, and then I taught fifth grade and first grade. But through that experience, I really fell in love with the Latino community, the culture. I personally got to learn a whole lot more about it, not just through my studies, but through those connections that I built with the students and their families. And I also met my husband as a teacher. Our first year, we were teaching at the same school together. And now I consider myself an honorary Latina. My daughters are Latinas, and I feel like being the mother of a Latina is like being the mother of dragons. It's a powerful, passionate energy that everybody is acknowledging, and you just kind of have to roll with. But it's been a beautiful life journey for me to really embrace that culture, become a part of it, start thinking in Spanish. I still remember that first time after dropping my students off at specials and having a thought about a lesson I was planning in Spanish. And it was like, "Ooh, who said that? I said that. That's me." That part of my identity was really formed through my experiences as a teacher, but continued to be a part of who I am as a human being. And I attribute an amazing group of individuals. It was a Facebook group called Latinas Earning Doctoral Degrees. And the women on this Facebook group were so inspirational and so supportive, really encouraging each other, just sharing different resources about how to get ready for the dissertation process, how to help other people with their research. And that experience connected me with a lot of different institutions, individuals in other areas. But one of the biggest takeaways from that was just that desire to see other people thrive and succeed and to celebrate those accomplishments. And so for me, I think my dad and his journey is what originally got me on the path to becoming a teacher, but it's really the community and the satisfaction that even though I'm not in the classroom daily now, I still have that connection through my students in ed leadership, inspiring what they get to do for their communities.
I love this. And so many connections because Dr. Munoz, that Facebook group kept me going too, especially during the dissertation phase. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, so very familiar with North Carolina. But also feel really seen in some of the things you all shared because I didn't intend to get into education either. Never intended to work in higher education, but ended up here and absolutely love it. And also I wouldn't change it. I just wish I probably would have known sooner, but I wouldn't change it for anything. So thank you all for sharing. And I think this is I just feel seen for different portions of each of your stories. So this is really nice. Um, so moving into our next question, I'd love if you all tell us a little bit more about how Latino and Latina educators historically have shaped the landscape of public education, and what lessons we can draw from their contributions to guide our current efforts and maybe even our future efforts.
Well, I'm happy to start us off for this question. One of the first Latino educators, or historically an individual that has had a huge impact in education, is Dr. Lauro Cavazos. He was the first Latino appointed to the U.S. cabinet. He was our excuse me, our Secretary of Education, which was a big deal. That was in 1988 to 1990. But prior to that, he is famous to me and to other Red Raiders as the first Latino president of Texas Tech University. And he was also an alumnus of our university, which is really cool to see a Red Raider go through that path all the way to becoming president of the university, but really bringing that Latino presence into the space of higher education leadership and decision making on a national level as the Secretary of Education for the United States was a huge accomplishment. Another Latino historically that I'd like to, or Latina that I'd like to highlight. Hopefully the Zoom will allow me to show here. I'm like, maybe with the backgrounds, I don't know, it's a little tough, but there we go. This is a lovely book to add to your classroom library, teachers. It's called Separate is Never Equal. And it is the story of Sylvia Mendez and her family in California. And she was famous for becoming one of the first students at 9 years old to enter and integrate schools that were historically all white. Her family was very instrumental in raising awareness and to answer that question of what we can do or what lessons we can draw from the contributions of these individuals. Her father was a farm worker, but he was really passionate about promoting equity for his children and for all children to have access to the same schools, the same education. And through his efforts to communicate that and go into legislative efforts and connect with other families and inspire them to join that case and cause, that was a big thing that led to the desegregation of schools in America. And so I think thinking about those leaders and thinking about ways that they use that Latino or Latina identity as a way to promote and bring more equity and resources to others is one of the lessons that we might be able to learn from them.
Now, actually, Dr. Munoz, I was actually going to mention the same thing about Sylvia Mendez. And I think it's such a powerful thing that sometimes the educators, and they may not get enough credit, are actually the ones that inspire students to create change, right? Because a lot of the change that has come in public education has actually been on the forefront have actually been our students. So we think about Sylvia Mendez and her parents suing the Orange County in California, the school district there for school segregation that actually, was before Brown versus the Board of Ed. So that was it. I think it was in 1946. So that kind of set a precedent there. I once got to travel to Chicago and I went to the Mexican Art Museum over there and I saw a mural that talked about how the Mexican and African American students of Harrison High School, 35,000 students walked out. That was in the 1960s. And they walked out because they felt like their schools needed more bilingual teachers. The schools were overcrowded. There needed to be more investment into their schools. So I think it's beautiful how our students are the first ones at the forefront, but I also know that it's also the education that they're receiving that's inspiring them to be activists, that's inspiring them to have their voices heard. Just recently in Connecticut in 2020, they became the first state to actually require Black and Latino studies at the high school level. And Paul Ortiz, which is the writer of An African American and Latinx History of the United States, um, was super instrumental in having that curriculum built there. And I had the opportunity to speak to him and also read that book. And I think that it is so important for all our students to learn about the Haitian Revolution and the Latin American Revolution, to learn about the leaders that created change when they saw oppression and tyranny and how they were able to overthrow that. And I think it's important for our students to be able to learn from that perspective and think about how do you see your culture, right? How do you see the importance of our leaders? Because we do have leaders, and sometimes those are the hidden stories that they don't teach us. And I think that's really important. And then, recently also, you think about the Secretary of Education right now, Miguel Cardona from Connecticut. And then also, I had the opportunity to also meet John King Jr., President Obama's Secretary of Education as well, Puerto Rican, both Puerto Rican. So amazing to be able to see them at the highest position of education and thinking about the work that they've done. I know Dr. King is right now at the SUNY level as well. So being able to just see that work and knowing that the students are at the forefront, that's really inspiring as well.
I love how y'all are bringing the history because I'm going to connect it to the present, but I also like to think, especially North Carolina and the South, that we are literally living in historic times. So it's still so much history in the making, so many firsts. And our first, let's say from 2023, just to connect to the history that's already being shared, was to have the first school in North Carolina to be named after someone of Latin American descent. And that was only 2 years ago. And it was Sylvia Mendez, the Sylvia Mendez Newcomer School in Guilford County. And she actually came for the ribbon cutting ceremony. So y'all know I was fangirling on another level. She felt like both of my grandmothers in one person. And she was just such a humble person, but especially for someone who has such a deep legacy that has impacted education. So I think about in North Carolina, as particularly, and then the South, and I will say just across the education landscape, teachers play so many roles that have shaped schools. And when I think about, I was in a speaking to a group of teachers of color, and that was one of the questions I asked the audience, which is a fun question to ask at like hundreds of teachers and see what they have to say. But it was like, what roles do you find yourself playing? And they said everything from nurse to social worker to counselor to Uber driver. Like there are so many hats. And I think what I mentioned is there's so many parts of that experience that is unseen. And sometimes even your existence on top of that. And so thinking about the advancements that have been made in the South, teachers have been a really critical part of that advocacy role. So being advocates for their students and our families has led to significant change over time. And so here, thinking about advocating for bilingual education, for cultural representation in curricula, for more equitable policies, to better serve students, to really looking out, especially for immigrant families that are often in positions of insecurity or even threats to their safety. So I think lessons that we can learn as we think about how to evolve education is really looking to those who are closest to the problems, and people who are serving our families and students every day really need and deserve a voice when it comes to those decision making, policy shaping, really need to be a part of that. And also the last thing I'll name just in the South, because and I'll talk about this a little later, but just where we are with regards to representation, but often Latino educators for Latino students have been cultural bridges within a very predominantly non-Latinx kind of space, our education system. So I've really been the voices that we need at the table to talk about the nuances of culture and how they show up in the classroom and in schools and in family engagement. And so really grateful for our educators' roles and making sure those voices and those needs are addressed.
Thank you all for that. And thank you, Elaine. That was the perfect round out to bringing it to current times and absolutely, particularly to the South and all the work that's happening here. Um, so thank you all for that. I will move into some direct questions for each of you. So we'll start with Dr. Munoz. What role does educational leadership play in empowering current and aspiring Latino and Latina educators to advocate for themselves and their students? And how can aspiring education leaders also develop these skills?
Big question and a very important one. And it reminds me of one of the classes I teach at Texas Tech, and I'm currently teaching this semester. It's a social justice leadership praxis. And the point of this course is to teach educational leaders the aspect of social justice, promoting that equity, and really understanding the process of how do we begin to explore those inequities. So we start with an equity audit. We identify areas of disparity in the data where things are not looking equitable for students that are Latino and Latina or students of color compared to other groups in the school system, identifying where those gaps are, and then creating the culture that allows those things to be resolved in a healthy way. Culturally responsive school leadership and teaching is a big buzzword in the education community. And it really is a powerful thing when it is done authentically and correctly. It requires a lot of braveness. It requires a lot of that disrupting of the existing systems of exclusionary practices that have been the way things are done for a long time. And really that leadership aspect of being a visionary, being able to see that future for what education should look like, and being able to communicate that to a whole community of stakeholders. A big part of that is engaging the families and the community. I would mention that I know Elaine talked a little bit about that family engagement aspect. That is a huge responsibility of educational leaders to promote that and create that culture where families are invited and allowed to participate in decision making, in sharing their perspectives, that knowledge that they are welcome and safe and appreciated. Their presence on campus is huge. And, sometimes families come to us with barriers of their past experiences in education or a language barrier or socioeconomic reasons. And a leader at a school has an opportunity to really create an environment and a place for all of those parents to feel comfortable and to feel like they can be a part of that decision making. I think the educational leaders also have a big role in fostering that same confidence and bravery and initiative in the teachers and the students at the school. They set the tone for that vision and that culture of what it looks like when we can have those healthy conversations about disrupting norms, questioning why certain things are done the way that they are, and really promoting that dialogue and that discourse, understanding that disagreement is a healthy part of every relationship and every organization. It's not about everybody thinking the exact same way, but it's creating those spaces and healthy communication pieces that allow us to have those conversations to build some of that change and support that vision for a better future.
Thanks for that. And a common theme, I think, in what I'm hearing you share and what all of you have shared up until now, too, is community. A lot of this is very communal. I think we all know this, right? But like it goes beyond the job description and it's about having this communal approach. Y'all are talking about parents, y'all are talking about community members, y'all are talking about advocacy. And so I think that also speaks to our culture and a lot of our values, right? In communal care and in showing up for each other and for all of us. And so, um, so much more work outside of just the classroom, especially for teachers like us. So, thank you for that. Um, I'll move over to Jorge. Jorge, as someone who is working directly with students, um, you talked a little bit about this already, but tell us more about how you navigate cultural responsiveness in your teaching and what insights can you share with future educators about really connecting with their students?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is that, the United States has always been a country of immigrants, right? And we're seeing so many students from so much diverse places around the world that speak different languages, right? And I think like where I'm teaching at, which is predominantly Spanish as the language spoken, to be able to be an educator that speaks Spanish, and to be able to communicate them in two languages is something that Latinos, we're very family oriented, right? So when we hear like certain, we have this culture, would you share this? So for example, the holidays coming up, a lot of students are like, Mr. Santos, what are you doing for the holidays? Are you eating pernil? And I was like, yeah, you know how it is. So just making that small connection of being able to share like something personal, right? Because when we're up in front of that classroom, sometimes they don't think that we have these lives, right? They just know you as Mr. Santos, and then they start to find out a lot more about you. Like the other day, a student asked me where I was from, and I was like, "Well, I'm Dominican. Like I was born here, but my parents are Dominican." And they were like, "Oh, me too." And I was like, "Yo, de lo mío, de verdad." So then right away they're like, "Oh, yo, Mr. Santos," and it's like you're really bridging a gap, right? Because that's something that our generation unfortunately didn't see. So to be able to have teachers there that can make that personal connection with our students that speak the language, um, what we're creating is a classroom where they feel like they belong. And that's really important because kids will not learn if they feel like they're not accepted, they're not seen, they're not heard, and that they don't belong in that classroom. So being able to create those spaces is really important. And that's really something that a lot of the educators, especially Latino and Latina educators, are going to bring to a classroom. Also, the use of technology. I mean, right now we are like with this AI and I mean, just Google everything. My school just implemented translation pens a few years ago, where literally they have pens that you can underline something in one language and it will translate it to you in a different language, and the pen actually speaks to you. So it's like, schools implementing policies and practices and protocols that are going to support the diversity that we have at our schools. That's really important for our students to see. Finally, also speaking to parents, right? Getting parents involved. It really takes a village. We've been talking about community. Teachers can't do it by themselves. Parents can't do it by themselves. There's a lot of distractions with social media, with things going on in the neighborhood. So we got to come together to support our students and also be able to explain to a lot of parents that don't understand the American school culture, right? So I'm for your second generation, so being able to explain to a parent like, yeah, this is the way that the school system works in Spanish is really important, right? Because imagine coming to a country not understanding how the school system works. You're sending your kid to school and you're hoping for the best, but being able to have someone that you can communicate with to express to them like, look, your kid's struggling here. We need to do this. We need to do this. That's something that's really important, and that's always needed. Um, and the more diversity that we have at the teacher level, the more we can support the diverse students that we serve.
Okay, there was a lot there, especially this pen. I did not know this pen was a thing.
Oh, it
So I'm so intrigued.
the other day, and I'm like, I need to learn a different language just so I can play around with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. But a point that also came to mind with the latter point you made about connecting with parents and having that relationship, I thought about trust, right? Like it is so much easier to develop trust in a teacher like you who can speak their language, who um, honestly is defying the odds of the systems that historically have existed and have ran these institutions and these schools. And so yeah, I thought about trust and how easy it can be to connect with their child's teacher who knows about pernil and knows about these pens and knows about the music and the things their kids are into, right? Or that they're into too. And how much that negotiation and that cultural navigation is so much easier because of that cultural connection. So thank you for that. And then for Elaine, tell us about how Latinx Ed supports Latino and Latina students and educators in navigating systemic barriers. And also tell us a little bit about what advice you would give to aspiring educators looking to make similar impacts in their communities.
Thank you. I want to start with just kind of providing some landscape, like where are we at? And so for folks who are listening, I'm going to share some numbers, and I want you to be thinking about what are your numbers, maybe your numbers of the state you're in. Just think about it and see where you're at. So in North Carolina, Latinx teachers make up 4% of the teacher population in North Carolina, but our student population is about 21%. So you can see that gap of even just proportionate, right, representation within the field. And if you even widen that scope, I know we're talking about educators too, so we can think about other types of educators, principals, currently at 2% of the principal population are Latinos. And then school boards, another critical role, right? When it comes to governance of schools, less than 1% of school board members in North Carolina are Latino. I could keep going, y'all, because I'm like, we're wrestling with some gaps and some zeros because there's currently no superintendents that identify as Latino currently serving. And then if you go all the way up to the General Assembly who influence budgets and all of those really critical pieces, there's currently 0 Latinos in our General Assembly in North Carolina. And so we're really wrestling with what does it look like to have people in decision-making powers who can understand or relate to those experiences directly. And so the work that we do at Latinx Ed is critical. I also will say, as much as we do wrestle, and there's a lot of emotions that come up when we talk about those numbers, it might be frustration, maybe it's like, we've lived it, we're used to it, all those pieces. But I also will say that we're here. So don't get it twisted. We are here. Teachers are here. We are in schools. Latino teachers and education leaders exist. And at Latinx Ed, it's really about how do we continue advancing Latino leadership in education, because we believe that is a critical lever for even more opportunity for our communities, especially when it comes to higher education. Being able to, and I think Jorge shared some of this in his story too, about being able to have someone in the classroom who you can talk to, who you can relate to, might understand some of the unique challenges that you're experiencing. And Latinos, we're a diverse community, right? We're at the intersection of immigration, of language, of culture. There's so many nuances. We're not just a monolith. So being able to have people who can understand that and relate to that, and it's just such a critical social, especially a social emotional support for students, but also a tool for information and knowledge sharing. And there's just so much that comes, the benefits of having someone who you can relate to, but also even for other students too, for all students to be able to benefit, to learn from teachers that are bringing such a critical lens to the classroom. So we're here at Latinx Ed. We are tackling these challenges, if you will, from kind of two lenses. One is a research and advocacy lane that we call our community impact lane. And if y'all are looking for some really good reading, we just released a report called Nuestra Esperanza, or Our Hope, what Latinx education leaders need to thrive. And so we interviewed and had focus groups with about 100 education leaders, a significant portion being teachers and educators, about why are you still here? Because the realities of retention across the field is real. So what is motivating you and to continue, but also what are the costs of trailblazing? Like, you are in many ways the first, sometimes the only, maybe Spanish speaker at your school or Latino at your school. So there's the significant challenges that come with that, but also how do we understand motivators? And so just I won't share the whole report. You got to read it. It's a good one. But when it comes to the cost of trailblazing, what we learned was the barriers that they were facing was 1, access to opportunity, 2, barriers to professional development, 3, cultural isolation, and 4, just deterring conditions for sustainability, for being able to really maintain even a livelihood in the field. And so those challenges are real. And the flip side was the hope. It was like, well, so why are we still, how are we still in this field and continuing trying to maintain that hope? And what came back was the power of cultura, just the power of what they knew, the significance of who they were in that role, and just the power of that and what they wanted to contribute. The second one was the potential of children. And I think that is very top of mind, I think, for a lot of why we even, are willing to enter this field, is wanting to create maybe even a better experience for maybe what would have been our younger self, thinking about what it would have meant to have someone like you in your corner and supporting you, which is the power of the future, right? The practice of collective care was the next one, which I think is a very cultural element and special strength that we bring. But just this power of the collective, what does it look like for us to collectively take care of each other? And last but definitely not least is the possibility of change, that maybe we could make this better. maybe we could improve this. And I think for me, that is a call to leadership. And I believe that leadership development is so critical to these conversations. When I started out in middle grades education, and my major was only 13 of us, and I was the only Latina in the group, only person of color too. And the reason I was there was leadership. Like I knew the challenges that my community was experiencing, and I was committed to trying to play a role in improving that. So a lot of the why wasn't just, of course, it was the craft of teaching, but also it was really about making a difference. And I think that's a really big piece when it comes to the recruitment, retention piece of the challenges that we face. So the last piece I want to share, especially for folks who are in North Carolina, I think I saw somebody from North Carolina in here, so it was exciting. But so sorry, hold on one second. Is our fellowship, because we offer a program where we're Latino education leaders, and we define that broadly, but are able to join and receive culturally relevant leadership development. They are able to better understand the state of Latina education and really build that critical network, the critical community of support. And that is to be able to continue on in this field. It's a lonely journey, sometimes depending where you are, what county you're in, what school you're in. And so being able to connect with others who are experiencing similar challenges and be able to help each other navigate that is so critical. So my advice, I mean, we talk about consejos all the time, but especially for folks who are entering the field, is to find community or create it. Those are lifelines to being able to navigate it. And we're building spaces where it makes it a little easier to do that.
There's a lot there too. A lot I can comment on and unpack. But I'll say this, the cost of trailblazing is real. And I think that resonates with all of us. And so really glad you ended the point too about creating and building community, because I think that is what sustains us. And building things that we wanted when we were younger, right? As I hear you all talk, I didn't have a Latino or Latina teacher in Durham until maybe high school, and they weren't even my teacher. I just saw them, right? And I connected with them, but didn't have a professor until my doc program again, right? And so when I think of what I would have wanted, it's exactly this. And so I'm glad that I get to create this and be in community with folks like y'all. And really glad that Latinx Ed exists in my home state, because that was also advocacy we didn't have. So thank you. We do have a few questions from our attendees. So I'm going to wrap up this panel portion with the last planned question. This is a question we're making a practice of asking at the end of all of our panels. So it's about dreaming, it's about the future and doing some world building. So I want to know what your dream of or for the future of our education system is, and how Latino and Latina educators fit in that dream. And we'll start with Dr. Munoz.
Well, that's a beautiful question, and thank you for asking it. I think that my personal dream for education in the United States is that we can be a global leader in education and really provide students, all students, especially Latino and Latina students, but every student that walks into a school, a public education system in the United States, to leave that system with all of the tools, all of the skills, all of the knowledge necessary to succeed in their life. Not just the academic portion, but thinking about social and emotional learning, thinking about the cultural aspect and that cultural responsiveness, being a true global citizen that is able to learn new languages, fit into new cultures, find a connection with every aspect of what they are doing in their personal and professional lives. And definitely higher salaries for teachers. I think that's a big part of my dream too. But above all, and this is something that I share with all of my students, and my heart of students are my teacher students. I love my ed leadership leaders. I love my pre-teachers on the P-Tech side, and even thinking about teacher assistants. But they're really all in that genre of teachers, aspiring teachers, to really think of themselves as leaders and to not just stop with the dream of, I want to become a classroom teacher. That's just the beginning of that opportunity. Where can you go from there? What will you do beyond that? How can you see yourself being that leader, that policy changer and maker, that professor, that Department of Education leader that is going to change the course of education for the whole United States. Just thinking about that leadership aspect and really believing in yourself and knowing that you are the only person that you need to believe in you to be successful, to accomplish those dreams, and knowing that when we as individual teachers take on those steps and become those trailblazers, like Elaine mentioned, not only are we creating a huge benefit for everybody that is a stakeholder in what we get to do, but we're also being those role models for our future teachers and educators and leaders and showing them that it's okay to think outside the box and to go big.
That was beautiful. Uh, so I always say this quote: "Education is the highest form of liberation," and I truly believe that our educational system should be giving our students the highest form of education, the highest form of liberation. And what I mean by that is that we want our students to enter our communities to bring positive change, to make an impact. And the educational system that the education that they experience in our schools should provide them with the tools necessary for that to happen. And for the Latino and Latina teachers entering the profession, I think you have to be the educator that you wish you had or that you needed growing up. And I think I carry that with myself every day when I enter that classroom. I try to be that educator that I needed, and I hope that I also inspire some of my students to one day enter the profession and also continue that. Right? They always say teachers, we plant seeds that sometimes we don't see grow. Right? So I'm just gonna continue to plant seeds wherever I go, and hopefully one day see those grow and come to fruition.
Ah, that's beautiful. I would say my dream is, and I think about Latinx and the work that we do, we say from dreams to action, because it's really about how do we get to that, right? And so, but dreaming and the act of dreaming, in many ways, it's freedom dreaming. So that reminds me that connection to liberation there. So for me, it's really education systems that recognize, meet, and value the diverse needs and strengths of Latina families and beyond, all families, right? I think about what a world would be like where systems that were meant to shape us can be shaped by us. I think that is a dream that requires radical imagination, requires radical investment, and innovation. And I think it's a call to action for folks who are entering this field to be a part of reimagining that, thinking about what, y'all know I'm a language arts teacher. When I ask you, like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that smell like? What does that taste like? And really activate those senses, because a lot of it, like when I ask this question to folks that are in our programs, I mean, things come up like it smells like pupusas in the cafeteria. It looks like flags hanging around the classroom. Or maybe on your graduation stool. It looks like or it sounds like maybe families being able to speak in Spanish and being able to get resources. So just that type of imagination, sometimes it may seem small, but it's so critical to envisioning where we could go and what we could contribute towards. So really activating that dreaming muscle is so important. And I'm just excited by the hope that of the legacy that we continue as education leaders. Like, we are standing on great shoulders of history makers, of change makers. And I think that's something else sometimes in advocacy work, especially in the South, because there is a disconnect with history and just access to that history, right? That sometimes it might feel like you're the first in many ways, but I will say this, our community has been advocating for improving education from the beginning. For folks who this might have been your first time hearing about Sylvia Mendez, I encourage you to, watch documentaries. There's information out there. It does require some like looking for it, but it is a really beautiful story, and it ties into just the legacy that we continue, and the importance of continuing that legacy. So just a lot of encouragement and hope, and just gratitude for the people who are in this field and are looking to innovate it.
Thank you all for that. That was beautiful. I'll pose some of the questions that we've received. and you all can answer as you see fit. So one of our attendees asked, what are current challenges that you feel Latino and Latina students are facing today, and any possible solution?
Yeah, I can go. Definitely, you know, the language barrier. Um, I always tell people this all the time. Imagine being in a country that you don't know the language and starting school in ninth grade. Uh, you know, it's an uncomfortable feeling. If you don't know anyone else that speaks the language, it's hard making friends. So it's definitely that's definitely a barrier. That's definitely a challenge. And I think that's why I had mentioned how technology is able to at least challenge that barrier and hopefully support those students. And I think that, you know, having teachers that speak the language is something that is so welcoming when a student is able to communicate to you in their home language, and you know, you can make a joke and they laugh and it's like they feel welcome, they feel like they belong. And I think that that's really important. But I definitely think that language is always difficult because you are expected to, you know, and at least in New York, you're expected to pass, you know, an ELA Regents, an ELA state exam. And that's difficult when you come from another country and you're still learning the language. So I think that that's definitely a barrier, at least one.
Thank you. Just for the sake of time, I'll move on to the next question. So how do current political perspectives influence the approach to immigration within the education system? That's a big question.
So I have an answer that maybe is not going to answer that question, but it's an answer that I think is really important for us to consider as educational leaders and educators. It's really important for us to be aware of all of the changes and the potential upcoming things that might be happening in our environment. But I think one of the most important things to focus on is what's within our locus of control. And within our locus of control as educators is what we can offer to our students to support them, the ways that we can empower families like we talked about. We may not be in control of the legislative decisions and changes that are coming up, but what we can do is provide our students the best opportunity to succeed. And like Mr. Santos mentioned, the aspect of that language barrier is a huge aspect for some of our Latino and Latina students with their achievement gap. And really, one of the best things that you can do as a teacher is to be really, really good at your craft. Be the best teacher that you can be. Know all the best practices. Take time for professional development. Approach what you are doing as a teacher with an open mind to think about what you can do to give your students that leg up. How do we close that gap? How do we give them the success that they need? How can we empower them to become those legislators in the future, to change those aspects of society that might not be in our favor as a community, really focusing on preparing students for that future with strong teaching and academic practices is one of the best tools, the best ways that you can empower them to be in a place to make changes for us in the future.
Thank you for that. So I hate to cut us short, but with that, um, we're gonna have to end. Thank you to you three for joining us and for having this discussion, and for really allowing us to learn more about your journeys. This is, I think, one of the most powerful ways for us to connect, at least in this virtual space, by really sharing stories from educators like you all. So thank you for your time. And this ends the panel portion of our time together. So for our attendees on the screen, you are going to see our various social media platforms, and you will also see a QR code to sign up for our free one-on-one coaching sessions to get started on your journey to the classroom. And I'll provide a gentle reminder that if you live in Colorado, in Connecticut, in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, North Carolina, New York, or South Carolina, we have many resources for you. So log into your Teach account with us to access scholarships, fee reimbursements, information about becoming a teacher, free advising in English or Spanish. And if you're in a different state, we will still do our best to support you on your journey to the classroom. And as promised in the beginning, at this QR code, you all can share your thoughts about our time together today. At the end of the survey, you will have an opportunity to enter a drawing for $200. I really suggest that you all fill out the survey before leaving your screen while your thoughts and your reflections about our time together are still fresh. The survey will also show up on your browser as soon as we end the webinar. So again, thank you, Dr. Munoz. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Jorge. And thank you to all of our attendees today. This was a great time together. And we hope to see you at our next webinar next month. So saludes a todos, and thank you again.